At 24, she had learned to cry quietly in office restrooms. Her name was Emily Carter, and every tear that fell into the marble sink reminded her of one thing: that her dreams came with a price tag no one else could see. Emily had recently joined Riverside Dynamics, one of the country's leading technology firms, as a junior marketing analyst. Her colleagues saw a quiet, polite young woman eager to prove herself. What they didn't know, what she hid with deliberate care, was that her father, Jonathan Carter, was the company's new CEO. Jonathan had just taken over from the retiring founder, and before officially stepping in, he'd made one unusual decision: to let his daughter experience corporate life at the bottom. No one, not even upper management, knew who she really was. It was Emily's idea. "I don't want special treatment, Dad," she'd said. "If I'm ever going to understand what your company really feels like, how people are treated, how they work, I need to live it myself. No one can know." Her father had agreed reluctantly. "All right, Emily, but remember, this world can be cruel, especially to those who don't push back." She had smiled softly. "Then I'll learn how to fight, quietly." On her second week, she met Mr. Paul Benson, her direct supervisor, the man who would soon make her life miserable. Paul was the kind of middle manager who spoke only upward. He wore arrogance like a tailored suit, loved deadlines more than people, and considered kindness a sign of weakness. When Emily first introduced herself, extending her hand politely, he didn't shake it. "You're late," he said instead, though she wasn't. I was here at 9, she replied gently. 9 isn't early enough for my team. We start when I say we start." That set the tone. From that day forward, Paul treated her like an inconvenience. He assigned impossible workloads, criticized her presentations in front of others, and often made sarcastic remarks about her inexperience. Whenever she asked for feedback, he'd sigh dramatically. "Emily, if I have to hold your hand through basic marketing strategies, maybe this isn't the right place for you." The office became a battlefield. Each day she walked in, she prepared herself for another wound. She cried quietly during lunch breaks, wiping her tears before returning to her desk. No one noticed, or pretended not to. The only person who ever smiled at her was Lena, a senior copywriter. "You're doing great, kid," Lena would whisper when Paul wasn't looking. "Don't let that jerk see you break." But Paul always found a way. Emily hadn't chosen this path to prove she was entitled. She wanted to earn her place. Her father had built an empire out of innovation and integrity. For years, she'd watched him run multiple companies while still finding time to be at her school plays, graduations, and heartbreaks. He'd taught her resilience. "When you walk into a room, Emily," he used to say, "remember, you belong there, even if they don't think you do." But nothing had prepared her for this. Every day, Paul's words chipped at her confidence. "You call this a report?" he'd sneer, dropping her printed slides on her desk. My 12-year-old niece could do better. When she'd stay late to revise her work, he'd mock her again the next morning. "Still can't get it right after all that overtime? Maybe you should find another career." He once made her redo an entire campaign overnight, not because it was wrong, but because he'd forgotten to give her the right brief. When she pointed it out, he smirked. "Excuses won't save you here." Her father, meanwhile, was busy preparing to officially take charge of the company within a few weeks. He'd visited departments anonymously, meeting with executives under the radar. Emily knew he would soon reveal himself as CEO, but she hadn't told him what she was enduring. He'd ask, "How's the work, Em? Learning a lot?" And she'd force a smile. "Yes, Dad, I'm learning a lot." She didn't want him to see her pain. She wanted to make him proud, even if it meant suffering in silence. By the end of her first month, Emily had changed. She no longer expected fairness. She arrived early, stayed late, and avoided eye contact. Her voice grew quieter, her smiles rarer. She did everything she could to stay invisible, But invisibility wasn't safety. Paul still found ways to humiliate her. One morning, during a team meeting, Paul presented her ideas as his own. He showed her proposal slides, unchanged, and claimed credit for the concept. The team clapped. Emily sat frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Lena glanced at her, whispering, "That's your work." Emily forced a small smile. "It's fine," but it wasn't. Something inside her broke that day. That night, she called her father, almost telling him everything. Almost. But when he answered, his voice was tired but warm. I just finished reviewing the quarterly reports. We've got a lot to fix in that marketing department once I step in." She hesitated. "Dad, do you think some managers ever go too far?" He chuckled softly. "Far too often. But that's why I'm coming in, to change that culture." She nodded silently, tears forming again. "That's good to hear." After hanging up, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I can hold on a little longer." 2 weeks later, everything changed. The company had organized a major presentation for the board. Each department had to pitch their upcoming strategies for the next quarter. Paul, hungry for recognition, decided he would lead the marketing team's presentation, using Emily's work again. "Emily," he said that morning, tossing a file on her desk, "polish this and print 10 copies for the board. I'll handle the presentation. Don't mess up the formatting like last time." She looked at the report, her research, her visuals, her words. Every late night, every tear, every ounce of effort was inside those pages. She felt something rise inside her, anger mixed with exhaustion. "Mr. Benson," she said quietly, "this is my project. I should be the one presenting it." He looked at her with disdain. "You? Present in front of the board? Emily, this isn't a school project. This is business. Real business. Leave the talking to professionals." Lena overheard from her desk. "Come on, Paul. Let her present. It's her work." Paul's eyes darkened. "Stay out of it, Lena." He turned back to Emily. "Do as you're told." Emily's hands shook as she printed the copies, but as she slid the papers into folders, something inside her clicked, a quiet realization. She had done everything right. She had stayed kind, patient, hardworking. And still, she was being stepped on. She didn't want revenge. She wanted dignity. When the time came for the presentation, she walked into the boardroom carrying the folders. The executives, all polished and serious, sat around the table. Paul stood at the front, oozing confidence. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "I'm Paul Benson, Marketing Director. Today I'll be presenting our new branding strategy, designed by my team, under my supervision." Emily watched him open her slides. Each word felt like theft. Then, a familiar voice spoke from the end of the table. "Mr. Benson," said the man sitting beside the chairman, "before you begin, I'd like to make a small adjustment." Everyone turned. It was Jonathan Carter, officially introduced that morning as Riverside Dynamics' new CEO. Paul straightened immediately. "Ah, Mr. Carter, I didn't know you'd be joining us today." Jonathan smiled politely. "I thought it would be useful to observe each team's work and meet the people behind it." He turned his gaze toward Emily, his eyes softening for the briefest moment before he masked it with professionalism. "I'd like to hear from different voices in the team today. Perhaps Miss—" He pretended not to know her name. Paul glanced nervously. "This is Emily Carter, junior analyst. But the presentation, well, it's complex. I can summarize." Jonathan interrupted. "No, I'd like Miss Carter to present. I believe the person who created the work should speak for it." Silence. Paul's color drained. "Created? Oh, I see. Yes, well, she assisted with some—" Jonathan's tone hardened. "Mr. Benson, I've reviewed the submission files. All drafts are authored by her." Emily's hands trembled. She looked at her father, at her CEO, and saw a subtle nod, so she stood up. Her voice shook at first, but soon steadied. She explained her research, the new branding strategy, and how the campaign could expand market engagement by 30%. She spoke with quiet intelligence, passion, and clarity. The board listened, genuinely listened. When she finished, the room filled with applause. Jonathan leaned forward. "Excellent work, Miss Carter. Innovative and data-driven. Exactly the kind of thinking we need." Then he turned to Paul. "And Mr. Benson, I appreciate your management, but let's ensure credit is properly given where it's due." Paul nodded stiffly, trying to smile. "Of course, sir, absolutely." But his eyes flickered with unease. Something was off. The way the CEO had said her name, the familiarity. He didn't understand it yet. Later that afternoon, an all-staff meeting was called in the main hall. Jonathan stood on stage, addressing hundreds of employees. "Today marks a new chapter for Riverside Dynamics," he began. "We're not just changing strategies, we're changing culture. Respect, honesty, and recognition will define this company." Paul stood in the front row, clapping dutifully, still unaware of what was coming. "And," Jonathan continued, "to lead by example, I'd like to introduce someone who has shown remarkable integrity and resilience despite adversity. Many of you know her simply as a junior analyst, but today I want to introduce her properly, as my daughter, Emily Carter." The hall went silent. Paul's hands froze mid-applause. Emily walked on stage, stunned by the collective gasp that rippled through the crowd. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Emily joined this company under a different name," he explained. "She wanted to experience it from the ground up, without privilege, without favoritism. What she experienced instead was a powerful reminder of why leadership must start with empathy." He looked directly at Paul. "Unfortunately, not everyone here has understood that principle." Paul's face turned pale. Jonathan didn't name him publicly. He didn't have to. Everyone in the marketing department already knew. The HR director made notes quietly. That evening, Paul received an email marked "Termination of Employment, Breach of Conduct and Misrepresentation." He packed his things silently, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Emily saw him leave, but didn't feel triumph. She felt release. The weight of silence she had carried for weeks finally lifted. Lena hugged her. "You earned this, kid. You really did." Jonathan joined them later in her small cubicle. "You okay?" he asked softly. Emily nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." He smiled. "You handled yourself with grace. You could have told me earlier." She shrugged gently. "Then I wouldn't have learned what it really means to lead." Riverside Dynamics changed dramatically in the following year. Under Jonathan's leadership and Emily's growing influence, the company transformed into a place where employees felt valued, heard, and respected. Emily had been promoted to head of strategic branding, leading her own small team. Her first rule: no one works out of fear. She'd designed a mentorship program for interns and new hires, inspired by her own painful experience. Every week, she made time to sit with someone at the bottom, the way no one had sat with her. Sometimes she'd still walk past the office restroom where she used to cry. She didn't avoid it. She'd stop, smile faintly at the mirror, and remind herself how far she'd come. Success doesn't begin with titles or connections. It begins with character. The quiet strength to endure, the courage to stand up for yourself, and the grace to forgive without forgetting. Emily Carter learned that the world will test your worth in harsh ways, but the people who try to break you often teach you exactly how strong you are. And sometimes, the tears you hide in silence become the voice that changes everything.